来到克莱尔的展览异想世界，我们将带你游遍全球第一手的展览以及周边新奇好玩的猎奇故事。I can find that my guest is now quite confusing in what I'm talking about. So this is
I have no idea.
This is my welcome back to my show to my audience. 今天非常高兴，我有两位来宾，分别是 Mike and Pairry. Say hi to our audience.
Hello.
Hello.
所以我们今天也是克莱尔的展览异想世界的第一次的尝试，邀请到 Mike 来到我们的录音室，以及 Pairry. We are talking about designing for impact, meeting design and sustainable meetings. So first of all, I would like to welcome two of you coming to our show. How do you feel our studio here?
Very comfortable. Nice couch. I like your pillows. People can't see them, but you have really nice pillows.
Yes, we do. This is our first podcast experience in Taiwan or...
In Taiwan it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And you know that our podcast, we're talking about the MICE. Mostly is exhibitions, but also meetings, events all around the world. Mm-hmm. So how do you think about that?
Well, I think there's a lot of trends which are similar, and then in different places, the markets have different levels of maturity for certain things, and particularly with regard to sustainability, I think there's big differences.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to introduce them. Mike is the founder of My Meeting, and you live in Netherlands, right?
I live between the Netherlands and Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so what brings you here this time in Taiwan? Anything interesting news to share with us?
You mentioned early Mind Meeting, but the company we have in Taiwan and for which I am a colleague of Pairry's is called Gibbon. Mm-hmm. That's a meeting design company. And so we're currently working on several design projects here in Taiwan.
Yeah, 所以Mike 他是这个吉本股份有限公司 Orange Gibbon 的共同创办人。那今天的另外一位共同创办人，也就是 Pairry 也来到现场了。
嗨，大家好。
Pairry 跟大家介绍一下，你今天跟 Mike 一起来到这边，以及你们的公司是在做什么样子的服务
？Orange Gibbon 其实在最一开始是我们汇集国际跟荷兰的 My Meeting 一起合作的，是因为当初我们就想要汇集国际其实一开始是在做国际会议，那我们就觉得会议这件事情有很多的可能性，我们希望让这个会议不是只是单纯的大家好像大拜拜一样把预算消化掉，那我们就遇到了Mike 他们在做 My Meeting 这件事情， 那我们觉得这件事情是很有趣的，是可以让会议的价值发挥到更大的，所以我们就因为这样子的一个共同的理念，所以我们在台湾就是共同合资了 Orange Gibbon， 那希望在台湾可以做 Meeting Design 这样子。
When and where did you meet Mike in the first time?
The first time is the other founder, Han. Mm-hmm. She met Mike in 2014.
In Antalya, Turkey, which was just happened to go to the same conference there, and we got to talking.
So 那是第一次的相遇，
是
Yeah. 所以 Pairry 聊聊 introduce yourself。
那因为我主要是在做会议，在汇集国际。那后来也是因为 Han 的关系，所以我们认识了 Meeting Design。然后我也是有这个机会去荷兰去上了第一次 Meeting Design 的课程，真的觉得非常有趣，因为它并不是像我们想象中的说graphic design 这样，只是平面设计。我们其实设计的是更多互动、更多体验的东西，这是让我觉得很有趣。然后我觉得我可以让会议的与会者甚至是主办方都可以有更多的获得，这件事我很想要做的事情。
So today we are going to talk about meeting design, and very important topic is how to make it more sustainable. So first of all, I would like to ask Mike, and you know that we are now in Nangang. It's very close to Nangang Exhibition Hall. And
I just saw it when we arrived.
Yes. And this week there's a very important trade fairs, which is TIMTOS. It's the most one of the most world's biggest machine tool trade fair in Taiwan. So we will start from the exhibitions and meetings. What are some of the touch points between these two face-to-face events?
Right. So if you start with a real helicopter view, of course, both of them are moments where people meet and they meet for a purpose. They're a form of communications which involves the live presence of people at the same spot. And I think both organizers of exhibitions and meetings, what they want is to create some kind of memory, something memorable that happens during these events. And as a result of that, anybody who goes to that meeting or exhibition should do something differently from what they did before.
Yeah, indeed.
If that doesn't happen, your money's been wasted.
Yes.
If everything stays the same, then it's money down the drain. So that's a very, very broad helicopter view. I think the key word in there is memorable.
Memorable.
You want to be memorized. You want people to remember what happened. One of the people I've learned a lot from is a guy called Eric Kandel. He works on memory, originally on the memory of slugs, very unattractive animals. But that was his first experiment. And later on, fortunately, he moved on to working on human beings. And he says, without emotion, people don't remember anything.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's a vital thing for me in my work as a designer. And I think it unifies exhibitions and meetings, because in both cases you have the opportunity, because people are live, they're present, they're physical, their senses work, their 5 senses work, you can really create unforgettable experiences. Unfortunately, that's not what happens a lot.
Oh, what are we seeing right now in most of the exhibitions and meetings?
You see a lot of what I call default thinking and default behavior. So people do what is already known.
Yeah.
The typical example of that is for meetings, which I know more about than about exhibitions. But the typical example is a meeting, like a conference or a congress, is speakers on a stage talking down to people. And that is a very poor experience. It's a very poor experience in terms of the potential that you have. And it's also a very poor experience in terms of the main objective, because many meetings have the purpose of people learning something. And in teaching science, we've known for decades that classroom learning is a very poor way of teaching people something. So why do we still do this in meetings? In exhibitions, it's similar. A lot of it is one-way communications. It is making a stand. And in the stand, in fact, the experiences that are offered to people are very limited. They're limited to just sitting down and talking. Yeah, you got nice things, you got nice little tables so that you can talk, you got bigger tables so you can talk. But essentially, it's just allowing people to sit and talk.
Yes.
Which is a very limited choice of experience.
Yeah, we can see that in the exhibition hall. Maybe we have a very large stand and people just come to visiting, and then you take the information and you leave.
Exactly.
But there's no interaction between the exhibitors and the attendees. How do you think about that, Pairry? 我想展览跟会议其实他们真的很接近，可是老实说，我也常常都说我觉得会议离我好远。那你们是不是也觉得展览跟你们的会议的形式也很不一样 ？But 他们有2个很重要的，刚刚 Mike 所说的，其实 it must to be memorable， 要被记得，而且怎么样产生影响力？你的看法？
是，的确，我也觉得展览跟我其实是很不一样的领域，但的确我们在开始做 Meeting Design 这件事情之后，我会发现，当你实际上去看现场的状况，它其实就是人与人之间的互动，所以我觉得在内容的设计上面，它其实是概念是相同的，但在执行面上的确在我们的工作领域的确是差蛮多的。
So it seems that there's still a lot of potential for meeting design principles to be applied in exhibition stands. So I'm curious, how will you go about designing a meeting when it is happening in an exhibition stand? Is there some key considerations or challenges that you will need to take into account? And how can you create environment that fosters meaningful interactions and connections between the both sides?
Right. And again, there's a key word in what you're saying, Claire, and that's meaningful, right? So often what you see is that it's all around the product in many exhibitions. And I think although the product is meaningful in the economic sense, it is not always meaningful in a human sense. So experiences that you can offer in exhibitions should much more focus on the human connection. And I can give you two examples. One is where, for instance, you really provide people with a shared experience. So your salesperson in the stand and your guest undergo a shared experience. And this could be something as simple as just going into a special part of the stand where something happens which relates to the product, but which is creating some kind of feeling of connection between those two people. Or, and you may not be happy to hear about this initiative as a company who does exhibitions, but there is one company I know about in Italy, and instead of going to trade fairs, what they do is they invite all of the people in their line of business to the village where they have their factory.
Yeah.
This is a very technical company. This is not something very sophisticated in terms of human communications. It's just that they're very advanced in terms of how they communicate with their stakeholders. Now, this is a lovely Italian village somewhere in the hills. Close by, they have a farm where the lady makes special cheese, and they go with everybody to the farm. And this started as a very small thing. By now, they have 10,000 people visiting this village.
Oh.
Now, this is very meaningful in terms of regional development.
Yeah, so you mentioned about meaningful. It sounds very simple, but it's quite difficult to execute.Pairry， 我觉得
，Yeah，
有意义的，或者是说，我们常常自己在执行一个摊位的设计，或者是你们在做会议的设计，所谓 Meeting Designer，I love the term that Meeting Architect 所以就是怎么去设计一个会议，我觉得它好像，因为我们自己也是一个设计公司，我们其实所有的东西都要经过被设计过。那会议的设计，我想它要牵涉的层面更广泛了，它可能可以来自于一个议题的设计，一个议程的设计，或者是每一个环节中间的这个设计。所以刚刚 Mike 提到的 meaningful 这件事情，你觉得对于你而言，你会怎么去诠释它？
我觉得用一个很简单的字，就是我们在讲的 legacy， 你能不能够让这件事情在它的影响力是可以延续的，这是很 meaningful 的事情吧。那我也想要再回应一下刚刚就是展览跟会议这件事情，展览可能是比较短的一个接触，就是他设计的东西其实是要在很短的时间就给出这样子的影响力，但会议它是一个比较长时间的，它是一整天的会议，或者是甚至是半天的，相对于展览来说都是比较长。所以在刚刚您说的就是的确是有很多环节上面要去设计的，因为我们接触的机会更多了，所以可能相对于展览会议来应该是更容易设计。
这个我很好奇为什么你会这样说 Because Pairry just mentioned about that the people meet in exhibition the touch points is shorter or I would say than meetings. Do you agree that?
They are meetings. The meetings that take place in exhibitions are also meetings.
So 你刚刚讲的是说，所以会议的这个整个对于你而言，它的整个那一些的所谓的 legacy， 或者是你想要创造的那种 wow factor， 其实你就必须要更全盘的去考量，对不对？
是我所说的比较短，是你跟像展览来的人他停留的时间是短的，但在会议中停留的时间是长的，所以你设计的体验当然是会不一样。那你要在很短的时间创造的 wow effect， 或是你在很短的时间要让他留下印象并做出改变，这件事情相对于停留时间长当然是会困难一点，但是就像您刚刚说，在会议上面我们必须做更全面的，因为我们在会议里面在传达的资讯其实是更抽象的，比较知识性的，不是那么具体说有个东西在，所以在会议的设计上我们就要去切分到很细，就是你之后你希望他们做什么样的改变，我可以留下什么样的 legacy， 所以每一个接触的点要怎么样 meaningful， 这是我们在做设计的时候在思考的东西。
Can you give us some example?
Yeah， 我讲一个比较近一点的例子好了，我们去年帮亚太社创设计一场会议的内容，那我也想要
这是什么样的一个单位？
亚太社创是针对社会创新企业做的一个论坛，他们把亚太地区在做社会企业这样子的小型的组织聚集在一起去做一个资讯的交流。那在这个内容上面2天的时间，我们要怎么样让它很有效率的，然后大家 飞来这么大一个现场，你怎么有效运用他们时间，然后创造出未来可以运用的东西？因为他们很希望让这个论坛变成一个平台，让亚太社创的这些企业家都可以做交流。那所以在这个内容上面，我们就必须去思考说，什么东西是可以未来让他们做交流的。那或许一个线上的平台，一个共享平台可能是会需要的。
共享平台，
对，所以我们就找到，就是在事前做了很多功课，找到一个他们可以共同一起工作的一个平台，上面就是他们可以分享资讯，他们可以去寻找帮助。那在这个东西不是你 launch 在会议现场，你 launch 他们就会使用，你必须让他们熟悉这个界面，让大家知道这个功能是他们要的，你要教他们操作。这是我们在思考的点，就是你的会议只是传达资讯的话是不够的，你要让他们的行为做出改变才是 meaningful 的意义，你要做的事情。所以在会议现场我们就要让他习惯这个操作。
Okay, the takeaways for me is that meaningful maybe it is to how to change the behavior.
Yes.
Okay, so any advice to the exhibitors, because we talk about the meeting in exhibition hall. Any advice to exhibitors how to what do's or don't do when you want to create a meeting in their booth?
Well, my main advice would be go about it in a structured way. So things through and make sure that whatever it is that you do fits who you are.
Okay.
So let me give you a simple example.
Yeah.
Suppose you are Red Bull. Okay? You call yourself the energy drink.
Yes.
Okay, so energy. What can you do in your booth about energy? Can you give people just a Red Bull drink, or is there other ways in which you can explore the notion of the fact that you are an energy drink through experiences that you do together with the people who visit your booth?
Yeah.
It could be sit together while you talk and cycle, so that you provide the energy that Red Bull needs in its booth. That would make sense to me.
Yes.
I would find that a meaningful way of combining an experience, doing your talk, not standing next to a stand which has brochures about the product, but sitting on a bicycle together and producing energy.
Yes.
Just an example. Earlier on, I heard you in the Chinese bit mention the wow factor.
Yeah, the wow factor.
Right. Is it okay if I say something about that?
Sure, please.
I have a previous life as an interpreter. And so I've seen many hundreds of international conferences. And often there was something which was supposed to be the wow factor. And again, many of those experiences which are presented as a wow factor, to me, particularly meaningful because they don't connect to a bigger picture. In the 1980s or 1990s, it was the laser show. You know, you would go to a conference and in the morning before you start, there was a laser show.
Make it big.
And it made it big with a lot of sound, heavy basses, and it was totally meaningless. It had no connection whatsoever with the content.
Ooh, okay.
Right? So I have that memory. And as a result of this work that I did as an interpreter, I saw so many meetings where I thought, you can do better than that.
Yeah.
Come on. So the wow factor is only useful and is only again, meaningful if it connects with, again, who you are as an organization. What is your identity? What is your mission? What is your vision? What are your values? How do you treat your people?
Okay.
How do you want to work with your suppliers and your clients?
I would say that it is the way to help your clients to know about their self, to know what their goals are.
Right. So as an exhibitor in an exhibition, if you want to offer an experience, you have to don't just think about an experience as such, but you have to think about an experience within a bigger picture. That would be my message to them. That requires some proper thinking. You can't just come up with anything. So it's not always obvious.
Yeah. 所以我们刚刚谈到 wow factor， 刚刚那个 Mike 也给我们了一个他以前的一个工作经验，因为他之前是做很多年的口译员，所以也在各大的这些很大型的论坛里面、会议里面，可能是那种welcoming party， 然后就会有非常以前的这种做法，可能都是比较的雷射灯光秀啊。但是现在你们在做会议设计的时候，其实大家要更多的是这一种 touch your heart 的感觉，对啊。So Pairry， 你有没有什么针对刚刚 Mike 的这个说法
对啊，我们自己在做会议的时候，常常也发现客户花了很多钱在做这些 wow effect。的确，对于与会者来说，看到的时候的确是很 memorable， 但是这件事情有没有对他们造成影响，是我们主办单位需要去思考的。在你花了钱了，你的确就是希望可以把这个讯息给传达出去嘛，所以这个 wow effect 不是不能做，而是你要把它跟你要传达的讯息串接在一起，
还是要 meaningful， 要有
对，还是要 meaningful。对，
那所以
may I? Because I've got a couple of examples I think that show you that. We talked about memorability, right? That things should be memorable. And it doesn't have to be something big to create a wow factor. You can also create and design something small. Here's two examples. My colleague had a program which was around teaching and teachers. And at the end of the program, he asked the 450 people in the room to take out their phones, to think about their favorite teacher.
Oh.
Okay? Think about their favorite teacher. And send a message to somebody else somewhere who they thought would be interested in hearing something about how memorable that teacher was. And then he waited until everybody had found a person that he wanted to send the WhatsApp or Twitter message to, and about this favorite teacher. And then at the end, all together, now press send.
Oh.
And so he created a very small experience, but which is like a virtual statue for good teaching.
It's gonna make me cry. Because
Okay, so that's memorable.
It is.
Because it makes tears come to your eyes. Right? Now that is designing for emotions that people will remember. And it doesn't have to be a big laser show. It doesn't have to be something flashy. It can be something which is human and which touches the heart or the soul.
That's true.
Another one, International Association for the Fight Against Cancer. They have 2,500 people. I had 500 of those people in a meeting before the meeting to get them networking, to get them to get to know one another. We had breakfast stations because it was before the event. And in that session, I simply asked, find somebody you don't know. Go to the breakfast station, pick up a plate, but don't fill your own plate. Ask this other person what they like from the breakfast station and make a really nice plate for them, and the other person will do the same for you. Now, those two people who met there, every time in the 3-day conference that they got together again, they were friends.
Wow, it is. Yeah.
You see? So you don't have to go for the big thing. You have to design carefully crafted human experiences which leave a lasting memory in somebody's heart or their soul, their belly, wherever it is that human feeling rests. It's not about facts. It's not about being big. It's about doing something which is, as we said, meaningful.
It doesn't have to go big, but they can interact so closely. Just make the plate for each other.
Right, and that is something that you can only do during face-to-face meetings.
Wow, I love that. I love these two examples. 好棒哦！
对啊，这也是为什么我们一直很想要把这件事情给做起来。因为我觉得有很多小小的东西是让大家都会觉得啊，这是。他不是为了做而做的，他是真的是希望帮与会者想的，帮主办方想的。
You don't have to wow, but you can be. This must be very memorable. Yeah. 我接下来想要谈的下一个话题 ，the next topic we're going to talk about is how to make our meetings more sustainable. It's a very important, I would say that, or everybody is focused on it. 那今天是邀请 Pairry 来聊一下哦。其实我们在前面有一直在聊说，到底要怎么谈永续这件事情，因为有时候又觉得永续这个议题好像有一点，有时候我很怕，
听起来有点沉重，
我很怕我很怕滥用它。
是
，Yeah, because we have heard about green meetings long ago, but for now it's sustainable, and then ESG, and then the SDGs index. What can we do when we are going to plan my exhibition or a meeting?
是，这个其实我们在讨论这个东西，我想要分享一个我之前做过的一个活动。我最一开始会开始认知到，觉得会议应该不只是 green， 它应该更 sustainable。是我们之前帮荷兰办事处办过一场开幕式，他们其实很强调所谓的 circular economy 循环经济这件事情，其实就非常的永续，因为它并不是说一直去强调你说你要 green， 而是它减少浪费。 它减少不必要的浪费。所以整场会议里面，我们其实包括了现场的布置物，我们是拿了他们要展出的一个展场的门片，拿到现场做一个背板。然后现场当然就是你可以想象的，不会有任何的塑胶瓶啊、一次性的用品。但是为了要可以把这个背板可以架起来，我们当然还是要做一些装置。但是这些铁件什么都是可以再回收利用的。那甚至是在上面做的一个布条，最后也都会拿回展场继续去做展示。所以我们那一场几百人的会议，我们最后离开的时候，其实只有一小袋的塑胶袋的垃圾。其实对我来说，我觉得就是我当下我觉得很感动，就是我办了一场会议，可是可以有这么少的垃圾量，感觉我好像真的对地球做了一些小小的贡献。因为我们看过很多会议结束之后，
展览也是
不是
很可怕，
几台的垃圾车在载。对，其实这对环境的伤害的确是很大的，因为你做了很多的浪费，因为不是看到这些东西被丢掉而已，当它生产的过程中，资源都是被浪费掉的。
So what will you say about the difference or why green meetings is different from sustainability? 最大的一个差异究竟是什么？
就是我觉得是从动机上是不一样的，就是 sustainable 其实是你更 care 到整个环境它要怎么样持续的运作下去，那它就不是单纯我们看到的对环境的照顾，也要关心人，也要关心这整个就是 mechanism 是怎么做的。所以就像其实我觉得联合国这17个 SDGs 就是非常好的一个给大家的一个参考的指标，而且它其实这17个 SDG 它还有一个很明确可以衡量的 goals， 所以大家可以自己上网 Google 一下这个资讯。我觉得因为我们这几天也是在聊说我们要怎么样提供给听众更多的想法，那我们很仔细的去看，就连我们在来的路上我们也还在聊这件事情，就是比如说像 reduce inequality， 他可能很想说减少国家间跟国家内的不平等，要怎么对会议来说我到底怎么样可以做，这就已经不是 green 的范畴了吧，这是一个非常 sustainable， 的确对。可是就是在让大家要都可以获得相同的资讯下，你这样你想要传达的资讯才可以更全面性的延续下去，对吗？所以或许在做减少不平等的这件事情上，其实对会议来说大家都会想说我们要找一个交通很方便的地方，让大家都可以来。但其实对于乡下的与会者来说，就是他们其实根本没有办法负担前往的这个费用的。或许我们应该换个方式，比如说我们就把会议移去这个城镇，就是对他们不方便移动的人来说，我们移到他的地方去。对于方便移动的人，他们可以过去，或者是现在 hybrid meeting 很容易了，就是我们移动过去之后，剩下的人我们就上网参加。对于在 urban 的人，其实他很容易的，他获得这些设备是相对于来说取得成本是低的，这样其实是更可以降低资讯的不平等。
Okay, so we're just talking about the difference from green meetings to with sustainability. What do you think about it, Mike? Because that we have heard about green meetings so many years, but now how to make our meetings more sustainable? And Pairry just talked about that not only to reduce the waste, but the most importantly that there's so many things we can do based on the SDGs. So how do you think about that?
Okay, so I think the first comment which is fair to make is that we've heard a lot about green meetings, but in fact, to be honest, not a lot is happening. You see some parts of the world where people are a bit more ahead than others, but essentially there is still a lot of pressure on price and on, just getting things cheaply without thinking about the impact that you have. So any meeting that you do will have a negative impact in terms of resources. You can't go around that. Whether it's big or it's small, whether you are totally sustainable, you will still have a negative impact in terms of the resources that you consume and the waste that you produce. On average, right now, the average meeting participant produces 2 kilos of waste a day.
Oh.
Right? Just imagine that. That's 2 big, heavy bags of waste each day, each meeting participant. Doesn't sound really good,
them
right?
To bring it back.
Well, that would be a way. That would certainly raise the awareness of that impact. My point, however, is I don't think that we should stop doing meetings, but we should take much more responsibility for how we do them. And one way is by trying to reduce that footprint that we have, that negative footprint, which could be in terms of the carbon footprint that we have, in terms of the waste that we produce, in terms of the food that we consume, and so on and so forth. The other side, though, is what do we produce as a result of the meeting? So the positive impact should outweigh and surpass the negative impact. And that is, of course, comparing apples and pears, as we say in English. I don't know how you say that in Mandarin, but it's comparing things which are not similar.
Yeah.
You need to reduce your negative impact in terms of resource consumption, and you need to increase your positive impact. And how to increase your positive impact, for that, there are some very clear guidelines and frameworks. The 17 strategic sustainable development goals of the UN are such a framework. So you can use that to gauge, just as Pairry gave the example for reducing inequality, what can you produce as positive impact on the 17 SDGs? And if that outweighs your negative impact, then your meeting makes sense.
Yeah, 我觉得刚刚 Mike 告訴我的應該是我聽到的comparing the apple to the orange， 就是這兩個是不能比較的，因為我們要去減低的 like green meetings， 我們一直說不要做什麼 don't do what, you do not waste or don't use papers or
Yeah, but it actually starts one step before that. Is the meeting the best way of achieving what you want to achieve? So ask yourself the question, do we really need this meeting? And to be honest, I think there's a lot of meetings which are done in such a way that we could easily do without them. People don't need to sit in a dark room listening to a professor. They can sit at home and you can send them the DVD.
Yes.
If the only thing that happens is listening to lectures, maybe you can reduce that 3-day program to 1 day. But people say, but the networking is so important. Right, the networking is important. And what happens during the networking? Yeah, there's just a break where people drink alcohol
indeed.
and hope that they encounter somebody who is useful. That's really poor, in my view, that's poor design. So you're not designing according to the 17 SDGs. You're wasting resources. You're doing things that you could equally well achieve in some other way. That meeting should not be held.
I love this point of view. So 不是要去想到什么就做什么，你必须要先去了解这整个的范围。其实 SDGs 这17个指标的话，你再去细看，里面其实有更多 you can make more positive impacts rather than you just not do this negative impacts. So 我接下来问 Pairry that we are going to that virtual meetings and physical meetings. So it sounds like if we choose to do physical meetings, so is it less sustainable compared to virtual?
就像刚刚说的，其实你要看你怎么样使用这个 physical meeting。如果你是在达到 SDG 的目标下去执行的话，当然它不会 less sustainable，right？ 就像我刚刚讲的，如果我们协助这些比较乡村一点的地方，他们可能电脑啊什么都很难取得，你怎么让他得到这些资讯？但是我们如果把会议移过去了，对他来说，他可以参加了，他可以认识到更多人，他还可以获得资讯。但对于其他人来说，他并没有不平等，因为他们也可以同样从网络上参与这场会议。所以我觉得这是并不相冲突的，就是怎么样，这就是为什么一直在讲说要 design for sustainable impact，right？ 就是这个会议你好好被设计，你好好思考过它该怎么样被执行，那当然就不会有所谓的就是比如说不那么 green 啊，或者是觉得好像我是不是违背了永续这件事情。
那我反而是想要问的就是疫情过后，你觉得现在所谓的 hybrid meeting 或者是 virtual physical meeting 它的比例怎么样？
现在大家就是慢慢习惯了 virtual meeting 就是从线上参加，所以其实 hybrid meeting 的比例是越来越高了。对，就是很多地方他们会，如果时间上没有办法配合，他们就选择线上参与，那他就可以节省掉这一段飞行的时间。其实相对来说也是蛮好的，如果你有能力从线上参加，其实对于必须说从执行单位来说，我并不想要。
什么意思？
对于执行单位来，就是如果是对于一个会议的执行者来说 ，hybrid meeting 其实相对是难度比较高的。
OK，
因为我们现场的设备等于是要做2次的，我要顾线上，我要顾实体。
You rather to take just a physical
or
virtual, not
Yeah.
hybrid.
No.
Hybrid seems easy, you know? You've got a group of people and you put a camera in the room and then you hope that somebody at home will follow you. I think that's a misunderstanding of how complex meetings are as a form of communications. Would you sit a whole day just looking inside a meeting room and following what's happening on stage?
Not at all.
That's not very attractive, is it? It's not a very attractive program. So I think hybrid meetings are very underrated in terms of how complex they work with regard to the participant experience or the client, what do you call it? The client voyage, so to speak. They need a lot of good design. Now, just making a slight sidestep, we just published our second book, which is called Meetings by Default or by Design. And we're doing a whole tour of presentations around the book. We're not focusing very much on the book, but we're focusing very much on this very question. What are face-to-face meetings? How do they compare to hybrid and online? And how do you make the choice of when each of these is appropriate? And what are the implications of that? So we're helping people in those book launch little sessions, events, to make a much more rational choice about which delivery channel they need for their purpose. And my sentence just ended with the word "for that purpose." The first step is therefore, what is the purpose?
Yeah.
Why do you have this meeting? What do you want to achieve?
Okay.
What is the kind of experience that your participants need in order to produce that change that you want that meeting to
Get back to the very basic question.
Yeah.
Why do we this meeting? So back to the sustainable meetings, I would like to ask Pairry to talk about would you give us some small steps for the organizations or our clients, I don't know how to do that. And should I go to a meeting designer?
Yes, of course.
Yes, please.
Yes, of course. That's why. Where can we find you and how can I start with a meeting?
OK， 其实有一些很小的东西是大家可以开始思考的，对，比如说像是SDG 一个我觉得很容易执行的，就是性别这件事情。你怎么样让在会议里面的性别是更平等的？
我先偷偷问一下，会议你讲的是会议从业人员还是说？
不是会议现场
啊？这个也可以去？你意思是说，在某一种会议里面的男生女生比例会不一样吗？
通常你可以想象，就是会议参加，我们先不管大家对于这个议题的兴趣的性别的差异，就单就任一场会议里面会发言的，你觉得是
男生
居多，
yes,
对吧？那为什么女生不发言呢？
害羞，怕被注视，或者是没有自信。
那什么样东西会造成女性会有这样子的想法？
很多男性在现场看注视着他，
这就是性别上的差异。所以我们应该要塑造一个环境，是让女生也可以很
feel very
comfortable to
yeah.
talk, right? 所以 I'm talking about the gender
inequality, yeah,
yeah. 所以现场我们其实可以，比如说讲者的比例。性别比例，你可以去做调整，这是从主办方就可以决定的事情，对吗？然后再来是现场，我们其实是可以设定一些游戏规则的。
我同意，
对吧？
我觉得这应该会大大影响女性想要发言的那种动机跟意愿。
就是比如说我们问题就是女生先问，下一个再换男生，再女生再男生，这样子其实我们并不是说不让男性发言，而是男性发言的比例通常比女性高，所以我们要塑造的，我们要让女性很愿意发言，我们必须去塑造这个环境。那其实是从主办方就开始可以做的，
非常非常有趣哦。最后 any takeaways for our audience today?
Okay, yeah, a couple tying in with what Pairry just said and what we were just saying. The first step is go to a meeting designer, but be careful. Don't come to a meeting designer if you don't want to change anything about your meeting. Yeah, because we're going to redesign it.
Yes.
And we're going to do things differently because they need to be done differently in order to become sustainable and to create a legacy. Now, That doesn't mean we revolutionize everything in one go. I have been working with a client for 5 years, and I started with one small session, changing the one session and letting them get accustomed to the idea. And now, after 5 years, they're ready to redesign their entire event. So we take the time. But if you don't want to change anything, don't come and bother us.
Okay.
Yeah? Okay, that's the one thing. Second thing I'd like to is, with regard to a sustainable meeting, be careful about greenwashing. Because it's not about looking good, it's about doing the right thing. And you can only do the right thing if whatever decision you make about your event, whether it's an exhibition or a meeting or a conference or a workshop or a seminar, it has to connect with your identity, and you have to be convinced that you can live those values. Otherwise, you'll be found out sooner or later. And today, it's very easy to be found out, and you will have very negative consequences. So greenwashing at the end of the day will never work. Although many companies think that if they say they do the right thing, it looks good and then it's good enough.
Yeah.
It isn't. You need to think the right things and act accordingly. And then I think the other piece of advice as a takeaway I have, make sure you follow a structured approach. So follow a method. We have a method that we've developed in the course of the 25 years that we've been doing this, and we apply that to our meetings. And it gives our clients the confidence that what we're doing together with them makes sense and that it has worked elsewhere. One of the difficult things for people is to imagine what a good meeting really would look like, because they know only the examples of the meetings which are currently done by default. So you need a method to be able to show people this is where we're going. Leave it to us, this part, because you know about the content, but you may be a cardiologist, so you know about human hearts and about operating them. But in fact, maybe you don't know so much about what works in a meeting. We do. We do, because that's our job. So trust us, and then we can make something beautiful.
Yeah, so 3 takeaways. 1, if you are not ready to change, don't go to a meeting designer. The second one, don't do greenwashing, but think the right thing to do. The third one, to make it structurally.
Yeah.
Yep.
And when you structure it, you can create the right legacy for your meeting. And I think that's the biggest thing in our message. Each meeting should leave a good legacy.
That's great. 谢谢 Mike give us takeaways. How about Pairry?
我想我就是很简单，就是对你的会议你要负责，你要想想看这个会议
这个突然背脊发凉，
有点上价值，
背脊发凉。
没有，就是这个会议就是不要浪费你的钱做一场没有意义的会议，所以你要对你的会议负责。那这个会议你希望它到底最后可以有什么样的结果，你要想清楚。我觉得是蛮重要的事情。
非常谢谢 Pairry 今天给我们的这个 takeaway，我觉得就是让我突然很冷静的思考，要对自己负责。因为举办一场会议，你其实是要对非常多人负责，你的听众、你的与会者，甚至是你的工作人员，对吗 ？So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Claire, for this opportunity.
对克莱尔的展览影响世界。I really appreciate your time to come in here and to talk about the meeting design and how to make our meetings or events more sustainable. I hope to see you next time here.
My
So are you
pleasure.
coming to Taiwan soon again?
Yeah, I'm leaving next week, but I'll be back in summer.
Oh, that's
with
great.
trainings for various purposes and events to be designed. Yes.
Thank you for your time. 谢谢 Mike 跟 Pairry 来到克莱尔的展览影响世界。我们欢迎所有的听众在各大平台 Apple Podcast、Spotify、Google Podcast、KKBox 以及 Sound On 订阅、分享、按5颗星。接下来克莱尔的展览影响世界呢，我们会分享更多有关于全球的会展，也会邀请这样子远道而来的贵宾来到我们的节目，然后从更多的角度去看这个会展的各种角度的面貌。Thanks again， 再一次谢谢 Mike 跟 Pairry， 我们下一次见喽，拜拜。